Hello again, I am Blunty, and for all of my life, I have been experiencing from the outside, from the inside, all permutations of fandoms in some way or another. I'm about to turn 46 next month, which means I was born less than a year after Star Wars was born. So that's been a part of my life my entire existence. I came to Star Trek in my very early 20s. What was I, 19, 20? About the same time Voyager was coming out on DVD, because that's how I first experienced Star Trek. And I know, Trekkies, I know, Voyager was my first Star Trek. Well, no, I mean, I'd seen other Star Trek before that, but my housemate at the time was a big Trekkie already, and we were renting the Star Trek DVDs as they were coming out for rental. So I did see it in sequence and in order and from beginning to end, and that's how I became a Trekkie or a Trekker, depending on how you want to splice that little apple. That's not a phrase people say. Splice that apple. It is now. You can see on the shelf back there, I've got Optimus Prime over there. That's the 20th anniversary edition Optimus Prime OG. That's a Walker over there, which was from the Mando show, the Lego one. Slightly out of blurry, there's an Enterprise there, the fake Lego Enterprise over there. Out of shot up there, there's a pewter statue of Wolverine. Over there, there's some Pokemon, just a Fallout helmet over there, of course. And I used to really enjoy participating in fandom stuff, talking about the shows, the comics, the movies, whatever it was, having discussions. Well, I like when this character did this, or I like this, I didn't like this about this. And, when Smallville came out, I was really sort of put off by Smallville when it came out, because it changed so much about what I thought I knew about the Superman that I was familiar with. But it turns out Smallville actually became a really good show, and I quite enjoyed it. And I recently rewatched it about a year and a half ago. I rewatched the entire thing, and it really hung together really quite well. Well, the first season's a bit rocky, but a lot of terrific shows have rocky first seasons. And the trick to enjoying Smallville for me was to let go of my death grip of what was canon and what was not canon. I ended up just thinking about Smallville, well, in comic book terms, in DC comic book terms specifically, it was an Elseworlds story. If you are more familiar with modern Marvel, as particularly their TV and movies, you might consider it a what-if kind of deal. That's what Elseworlds imprint DC was. And there are some fantastic Elseworlds stories. I'm going to reread a few soon, I think. Gotham by Gaslight. They made an animated movie about that, which was okay. Comic books better. But today's fandom, fueled by the way that modern social media works, has become an absolute cesspool of just indignities and ridiculousness and buffoonery and clownery and just all kinds of misery. People don't enjoy things anymore, you'd think, just by looking at the way the social media is directing things. And that's because the people who are hateful towards this stuff are just loud. The rest of us are just sitting back enjoying things. So you only notice the loud stuff more, and they never ever stop with it. Their whole entire deal is to try and be as disruptive as possible, because the thing is happening that they don't like. And it's usually because of personal politics or something, because they imagine the stuff they used to love never used to be political, and now it is. Which is hilarious, especially for Star Trek fans, because, and I'm thinking about doing a series of videos about this, looking back at how political OG Star Trek actually was, that people imagine that Star Trek being political is a new concept. But even Star Wars, I mean, George Lucas himself is on record in interviews more than once talking about the politics of the OG Star Wars stuff, and how when he was writing it, when he was conceiving it, the rebellion was basically the Viet Cong, and the evil empire was America. All right, it doesn't get more socio-political than that. The whole thing was focused around the ideas and sort of attitudes and socio-political discussions that were going on around the Vietnam War. Star Trek had a couple of episodes that were focused around that kind of concept as well, and the Cold War for that matter. And it's just infuriating to watch people get so much air, so much attention for saying such impossibly stupid things. And I think that's the point, because a lot of these people are blue tick users, which means the more attention they get, the bigger their reach is, and they can potentially get some money for, outrage stuff. We're all familiar with it by now. It's just bait. It's always bait. And people can't resist engaging with it because, it's just, well, good bait works. It's just the fact of human psychology. We can't escape it. What we can do is, instead of biting so hard on it, just laugh at them for being so silly. So that's what I wanted to do for the next bit of this video. And a couple of these come from the same person just because I've seen them enter my timeline on Twitter or X or whatever it's freaking called now, multiple times, because they're the ones that sort of got the most momentum that people are reacting to. And there's one here from one person who calls themselves Lucas Star Wars Girl. So they've got Lucas in their username and Star Wars in the username, and they really, really don't understand Star Wars at all. They've got one here calling out the ridiculousness of obese Jedi, because there was a fat Jedi in one of the episodes of the latest show, The Acolyte. Isn't body shaming. Porkins being overweight made sense. He was a pilot and could still achieve the skills needed. An obese Jedi, however, makes no sense whatsoever. Just another diversity box ticked. The expense of logic. So somebody with Lucas and Star Wars in their name hasn't seen Empire Strikes Back. Springs to mind. Let's talk about Yoda. And Yoda flat out telling Luke to cut that shit out. Judge me by my size, do you? No. And well, you should not, because the Force is my ally, and a powerful ally it is. Okay, so physical strength, not a prerequisite for being a Jedi, even one of the greatest Jedis ever. Yoda. Old, 900 years old, frail, weak, tiny, 2 foot tall, walks with a cane, Yoda kicking the shit out of Count Dooku. There's nothing we've ever learned about the Jedi as a whole that would insist that to be a Jedi you have to be in peak physical condition. There are many different ways you could be a contributing member of the Jedi Order. Not all of them involve being really, really fit and good at fighting. The same is true of real-world monks as well, for that matter. I mean, the most famous presentation of the Buddha, for example, is the Laughing Buddha. A big fat guy! You don't hear very many people going, well, he couldn't possibly have been a righteous, high-minded, monk. He was a fat guy. Fat guys can't contribute to spiritual matters. Stupid thing to say. You have literally destroyed Star Wars. Literally destroyed it. It's gone now. It's just completely gone. Obliterated. Doesn't exist anymore. Star Wars doesn't exist anymore. It's been completely, literally destroyed. Congratulations. Another minority group thinking they have the say over everything just to be heard and acknowledged. I can't imagine how disappointed George Lucas must feel by destroying someone's vision and storytelling. Yeah, because Star Wars has never been about a minority fighting against an oppressive force trying to keep them down? Oh, wait, the rebels and the Empire. Let's have a little think about that. Could that in any way be a representation of a minority force fighting against an oppressive, crushing, doom machine that is trying to squish them out of existence with hate and misery yeah, that would probably be the way we could just draw that little metaphor. I mean, I know it's a difficult thing to imagine, and it's really a long bow to draw. Really, no, it's not. It's exactly the same fucking thing. The Empire wanted to squish out everything that didn't align with his personal belief systems. You're the bad guys. I suppose you also think Homelander is the hero of the story. And they're out there complaining that the new show, The Acolyte, paints the Jedi in a bad light, that they're very morally grey, or, secretly the bad guys. And again, have you not been paying attention to the Star Wars movies? Even the ones George Lucas made, the prequels, for example, where the Jedi were presented as literally out of touch, living in an ivory tower, like a literal ivory tower, or whatever stands in for ivory in the Star Wars universe. And so wildly out of touch, there was a Sith Lord under their nose for years and years and years, manipulating things, creating a war to create a power vacuum. It's just, the Jedi are out of touch. The Jedi aren't aware of everything that's going on. They're not omnipotent. They're not the universal, pure good guys of all time. There are bad Jedi. There are Jedi that went grey. There are Jedi that went rogue. There are splinter groups of Jedi, even in the EU lore. And did you never, ever think it was weird that when Luke went to Yoda, for example, Yoda initially refused to train, too old. And then we got the prequels, and they talked about how even Anakin was too old. He was a little boy, too old to begin the training. Did you ever think it was really weird how an order, a religious order of warrior monks, basically, like to take children away from their families when they're really, really as young as possible to indoctrinate them into their order, their belief system, their religion? Did you think that was something the good guys would do? Does that sound like a pure-hearted thing to you? Taking children away from their families to indoctrinate them in a belief system so they could be part of your, army. Your police force, if you will. Your religious police force. The Jedi are not universal good guys. There are problems with the Order. All of the movies have acknowledged this. The 6 that George made. The other ones that we got a little bit later, which I like a little bit less, because they're kind of poorly written and weren't planned out properly and made by two different people with very different agendas for what story they wanted to tell and how they wanted to tell it. But even those movies acknowledge that the way the Jedi were doing things, and even Yoda agrees with this, again, Yoda, it might be time for a new way to do things as far as the Jedi go, because there were some issues with the old way, with the old dogma of the Jedi Order. So exposing those issues, exploring those issues in a television show is not something that would have, quote unquote, George Lucas rolling in his grave, which is a quote I saw. George Lucas is not dead, by the way. He doesn't have a grave yet. He might have a grave site planned already. What if he'd be buried on the ranch? I would be if I was him. Beautiful place. Stunningly beautiful place. One of the good ones comes from the most recent episode, so moderate spoilers if you haven't got around to watching it yet. It's only a few days old or whatever. But they featured a character who we saw in the prequel trilogy, had a few lines and everything, part of the Jedi Council. Significant figure, but not very important in the story overall. He was just there to deliver a line for some context, basically. But he was featured in the Acolyte story, which takes place like 100 or so years before everything else that we're talking about here. And people are getting really upset because before now, his birthday was after this Acolyte story is taking place. And they're getting really upset because Acolyte has changed canon and destroyed George's vision. It hasn't really, because the only places his birth date are ever mentioned are non-canonical anyway. It's like on the back of a trading card somewhere that came out when the original movie came out, and in a CD-ROM of some kind, I think. I haven't bothered to look into it really because I don't care. It doesn't really matter whether it was real canon or not real canon or EU or Legends stuff. It's all made up anyway. If they want to change something, like George has changed stuff. In fact, George went back and changed a bunch of stuff about the 3 original movies. He went back in time and retconned stuff. Some of it I really, really hate, by the way. Like the bit where Vader screams no. Because that was in the prequels, and he went back and added it to the original movies for some reason, and it sucks all of the drama out of that moment because it sounds so goofy. And George himself is on record, again, multiple times, saying he doesn't really care what is established in anything that is outside of what he built so far. When he's talking about the EU stuff and the novels and the comic books and even the TV show. And things like that. He was like, well, that may or may not align with what I did. I don't really care. It's just a storytelling medium. He's also on record as expressing kind of exhaustion at people, saying, whenever I change anything, this is when he was still in charge of Star Wars, before he sold it to Disney, whenever I change anything, people act like it's the end of the world. And it's just like, and look, I get it why canon is so important. I made a whole video about why canon and things that break canon really, really get under some people's skin. And for some of us, it's literally a neurological thing. Here's a little tip for you. Anytime something happens, like the Acolyte, for example, that you think breaks canon or you think doesn't align with what you understand of the world, just think about it as an alternate universe, like Smallville. Because as soon as I started thinking about Smallville as an Elseworld story, an alternate universe, I wasn't living with those expectations of, well, this is not what they did in the comics. This makes no sense. Why is Lex Luthor in Smallville, and why are they friends as kids? It doesn't make any sense at all to my current understanding of canon as far as the comic books go. And at this point, I had piles and piles of Superman comics I've been reading for years. But the instant I went, okay, it's just an alternate universe thing. They're telling a story. They're framing it using familiar things from the Superman universe. They have a story they want to tell. They have characters they want to sort of explore in various ways. And this is how they're choosing to do it. And it was like, oh, it's actually a really fun show now. So whenever you feel yourself getting triggered by thoughts of what is and what isn't canon, you can choose to let it go. Again, in the words of Yoda, fear of change, for example, is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger, for example, flipping out online like an enormous clown and embarrassing yourself. Anger leads to hate. Well, now you hate the thing you used to love because you let yourself get carried away. And hate leads to suffering. Now you're all tied in knots. You're suffering because you're so angry and just enraged in a ball of just uncountable emotions roiling away, and you think you can't enjoy the thing you used to love. All you need to do is let go of the fear. Yoda already has the answer for you. He always has. And, as far as lines from fiction go that have helped me throughout my personal life, that is one I've always held on to because I am neurodivergent. I am autistic, which is part of the stuff I was talking about before with canon and stuff. Go back to the other video if you want to hear more about that. But part of how I experience autism is I often have trouble moderating my own emotions, which means I can get carried away sometimes with particularly intense emotions like fear or hate, for example. And one of the things that has genuinely helped me when I get caught in sort of a loop of that kind of stuff is Yoda. Fear leads to anger leads to hate leads to suffering. And I'm not saying it's easy to let go of that stuff because it often isn't, but it helps. Oh, and if you are a Star Wars fan and you want to seethe with jealousy, for example, this shirt, I bought this at Skywalker Ranch. That's right. I've been to Skywalker Ranch. I've been to George Lucas's own ranch. I have eaten hamburgers made from the beef of the cows that George Lucas raises on his working ranch. And they were delicious, by the way. I'm not even kidding. They were seriously good burgers. I was even sworn in as a Jedi by a George Lucas officially sanctioned Jedi in full robes who taught us some lightsaber moves. And I was sworn in as a Jedi with an oath and everything. That was from many years ago. It was part of a press junket thing for the release of Force Unleashed 2. That was a fun day, though. Got to go to Skywalker Ranch. And I'm an official Jedi. So when I tell you just to calm your tits down, that's coming from an official Jedi. Canon Jedi. Jedi Blunty. So put that in your lightsaber hilt and smoke it. But yeah, we, and I say we in the broadest sense of fandoms in general, need to find a way to better deal with this kind of weirdness because it's just corrosive and ugly. And it just paints us all with a hideous hue. Like, because these things are so loud and they get so much attention because they are, negative, they're hate bait and stuff like that, they make the entire fandom look just horrible. And if you love something so much, you'd think you'd want as many people to experience that thing that you love as possible. I mean, why wouldn't you? Why would you be trying to turn people off of the thing that you love? Why would you go to such extensive lengths to present the community around this wonderful thing as a cesspool of misery and hate and whining and complaining instead of just lifting up the awesome things about it? It'd be the Jedi way to do it. You don't want to be the Empire, do you? Or do you? I think they might. It's possible. Anyway, those thoughts have been stuck in my head for a little while now. I've got them out of my head now. So now I can await the next episode of The Acolyte and wait to see what hilarious new things people choose to get mad about for no particular reason, instead of just enjoying a show and thinking about what is it exploring, why is it exploring it, why is it exploring it in this particular narrative fashion? Because that's what these shows are for, by the way. They're not just, oh, look at the guy jumping around with the glow sticks. They're about exploring socio-political issues, and they always have been. Just ask George Lucas. So, thank you. I will catch you next time. I am Blunty. Those are my patrons. Thank you very much to those people as well. I was gonna dig out my custom-made lightsabers for this video, but they're in the back of a closet back there, and I couldn't be bothered. There's a bunch of stuff in front of the door, and I'm lazy. But I have my own custom-made lightsabers as well. Of course I do. Look at me.